Nearly 120 combat engagements took place on the front line over the past day. The highest number of assaults, 22, occurred in the Pokrovsk direction and in the Kostiantinivka sector. The enemy attacked 15 times there and 14 times in the Huliapol sector. The Mykolaiivka sector remains active. There the occupiers attacked in the areas of Ivanivka, Novohrihorivka, Zeleny High and Zlahoda. In the Sloviansk direction, our defenders stopped the occupiers' attempts to advance in the areas of Dronivka, Rai Oleksandrivka, Riznikivka and Yampil. Volodislav Voloshin is joining the conversation, spokesperson for the Defense Forces of Southern Ukraine. Colonel, welcome.
Good morning, glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes, and glory as well to all those people who are bringing our victory closer. Let's clarify what we should understand in the context of what's happening on the southern fronts.
In the south, the situation remains more or less stable without any sharp changes. That is, the number of combat engagements is roughly at the same level. And even at the beginning and end of last week, there were somewhat more combat engagements. Right now, the enemy is carrying out certain regroupings of forces and assets, although the number of shellings and strikes, including airstrikes and drone attacks, is not decreasing. Well, you've already mentioned the number of those combat engagements taking place in our directions. The most active is the Huliapol direction. Here, the enemy quite often, you could say, uses not only assault tactics, but also infiltration tactics, trying to penetrate deep into our defenses. And Russian propaganda even claims that they are taking control of certain settlements, although this is actually not true. Both last week and this week, the Russians have named several settlements that they allegedly captured, but all these settlements remain under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. In particular, this includes Hirka and Veselyanka in the Orikiv direction, as well as settlements in the Huliapol direction, such as Pridorozhne and a number of others. All these villages remain under control. I repeat, under the control of the defense forces of Ukraine. As for the Oleksandrivka direction, over the past day, as you mentioned, there were 7 combat engagements. However, some of these combat engagements were firefights, not enemy attacks on our positions. And here in this direction, the defense forces of Ukraine are trying to seize the initiative, the tactical initiative. We are actively carrying out strategic counteroffensive actions here. And we are successfully re-establishing our full authority across various regional territories and local residential settlements. So the situation in the south remains difficult for us, but the defense forces of Ukraine have achieved certain successes in one of the directions.
How are the enemy trying to create conditions for another crossing of the river? And what changes do you observe in their tactics, strategy, behavior, and so on?
Over the past day, we have recorded 2 combat engagements in this direction. The enemy tried to assault positions near the Antonivsky Bridge, the road bridge. This is the narrowest point of the Dnipro where it is possible. Let's say it's about 700 to 800 meters. And first of all, having control over this side of the Dnipro near the Antonivsky Bridge allows you firstly to launch drone strikes, and you can even open fire on the right bank. That is why the enemy is trying to push the Ukrainian defense forces out of these bridgeheads. In addition, the enemy tried to cross over to Bilorudi Island, but they did not succeed. The entire military attempt was, if one might put it that way, completely halted at its very earliest inception, occurring at the precise moment when the opposing forces were only just beginning to depart from their own native coastline. Well, looking at the situation as for whether the enemy is currently preparing any large-scale crossing, according to our latest intelligence, we have not yet detected any specific signs of such large-scale preparations in particular. But the enemy is continuously and persistently attempting to establish logistics with their observation posts that are strategically positioned across several different islands. They are trying to conduct constant reconnaissance, as well as striking at the Ukrainian defense forces, attempting to disrupt our logistics.
Let's talk about Hirka and Zaliznichne. The enemy, they are targeting the Huliapol direction, concentrating around these settlements. Why are these particular places becoming targets for the enemy? What tactical objectives is the enemy pursuing there specifically? And what would change for the Zaporizhzhia direction if the Russians were to achieve even a local success?
They will not achieve success there. In Zaliznikny, we record up to 24 combat clashes every day. The enemy is trying to take control of this settlement as well. Beyond it, in the direction of Zaporizhzhia, lies the settlement of Hirke. The adversary is attempting to advance closer here in order to later assault the settlements of Verkhna Tersa, aiming to cut them off. From the north, Orekhiv, and then to advance further in the direction of Zaporizhzhia. And in addition, this is also an attempt to encircle the city of Huliaipol from the southwest and to finally drive out the Ukrainian defense forces from there. What will change if the enemy captures it? Well, they still need to capture it, and in fact, they've already lost several units there near the railway. Because, well, attacking 20 to 25 times a day, and, well, unsuccessfully, while suffering losses, well, that's quite, let's say, costly in terms of manpower and military equipment. And also the enemy is constantly striking here with aviation. In addition, using helicopters, the enemy strikes Sharivin every day. This is a populated area located somewhat south of Zalisnitske and Hirke, but also on this section of the front. In other words, this is one of those sections of the front where the enemy is currently most active.
When we talk about a local assault, it's important to understand where is the enemy's real plan and where is it an information psychological, or some other kind of operation. So, Mr. Vladislav, taking into account what you are able to say, can you name 2 or 3 real objectives of the enemy that you understand or that are obvious, or perhaps you don't understand them but they are still obvious? And what would have to happen, we're talking about March now, what would have to happen for you to say, yes, they have changed their plan? What is your forecast?
Let's start in the south, from the western direction of Zaporizhzhia. The westernmost is the Orekhiv direction. Here the enemy is trying to break through along the shore of the former Kakhovka reservoir and take control of Stepnohirsk. We have been driving them out of there for half a year now, and they have had no success at all. However, Stepnohirsk still remains one of their priorities. Next, the enemy. According to our intelligence, their units have been tasked with getting as close as possible to Orekhiv. These are the sections of the front, starting from Shcherbaki, Mali Shcherbaki, and ending with Mala Tokmachka to the east. Furthermore, these advancing enemy units now have a specific set of objectives. First, they must reach the very edge of the front line. Then they are tasked to carry out coordinated assault actions against the defenders. And finally, they need to secure their strategic positions on the outskirts of the territory of Orekhiv. So Orekhiv is yet another target and priority for the enemy. Next, if we look further, there is Mern, Sharivne, and then Zaliznikne and Hirke, which means an encirclement of Huliaipol from the south. Then, advancing near the settlement of Dobropilya and breaking through there in order to strike in the direction towards the settlement of Pokrovska in the Dnipropetrovsk region. And then this is the final expulsion of our forces, starting from the areas of Zlahoda, from Ternov and from Kalinivka, while also systematically leveling out the entire line of contact at the settlement of Ivanivske. Consequently, these represent practically 5 to 6 strategic objectives that the enemy forces have to successfully achieve and accomplish during the month of March. According to our intelligence, these are exactly the objectives assigned to the Russian commanders. By the way, the commander of their 90th Tank Division, which is located near, right there where Ivanivske is, where Zeleny High is, the command of this 90th Division recently received a penalty for failing to accomplish the assigned objectives, that is, for not capturing certain positions. In addition, according to our intelligence, Russian commanders at the company and battalion level are submitting reports to the headquarters of their 36th Motorized Rifle Brigade. They are submitting false information about the location of their units in one of the settlements. This is also happening in the Oleksandrivka direction. And during an inspection by higher headquarters using unmanned aerial vehicles, it was discovered that there were no Russians there. So the Russian command gave the order to move their command post there and continue to direct operations from that location. This means that the fight against such window dressing in the Russian army continues. In reality, they won't go there because, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Ukrainian Defense Forces have already seized the initiative there, and we are striking them there.
At themselves. Volodymyr Voloshan, spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces. Thank you for joining us and discussing the situation on the southern fronts.